as I expected. They are now, so it was a trafficker's car, and they are, I don't know if you can see behind me, can I zoom that in? That is a migrant boat. Now, they were waiting for that plane to disappear.
The illegal invasion of the UK via its southern border gets worse by the day. The weak and gutless political establishment turn their head wherever possible. They want to pretend that this isn't happening. And that's why we need independent journalists who are going to be on the ground and discover what's really going on. And that's exactly what Callum Smiles has done. He was on the ground in Calais for the first time in a year, and this is what he discovered.
On my first day back in Calais for over a year, I thought where better to check than where the African migrants, who were most likely Eritrean, were last time, which was a small town called Mark, a town connected to Calais. The police do move on the makeshift camps after a while. However, this time I saw very small camps in trees and what possibly looked like old warehouses which had been commandeered by the migrants to live in, whilst the NGO group La Vie Active facilitate their stay. Since the government has pledged to stop the boats since 2018, there have been multiple schemes to supposedly do so, all whilst over 134,000 migrants have successfully made the crossing, and that number continues to grow.
Callum Smiles, great to have you here on Outspoken. It was fascinating work in Calais. And I guess what you discovered is that even though the French might be trying to crack down a little bit further, in fact, the migrants are still out of control. They're still doing their own thing, and they are still intending to flood the UK via the southern border.
Well, I mean, the main thing I've just learned is that when editing, I need to lower my logo because it's slightly cut off in your thing. But yeah, they are. And that was it. I actually felt a bit inspired this week and a bit hopeful in terms of where things are going because in times gone by, we've literally seen recordings of like the gendarmerie escorting the migrants to the beach to get on a boat and then away they go. Whereas this time, so I actually didn't go out there to do much filming myself. I was actually showing a left-wing filmmaker around the place because he was wanting to put together a piece about patriotism in immigration. So I thought, well, you know what? You seem like a nice enough guy. I'll show you around if you want. And we went out at 5 in the morning, and there was a lot of police were rounding up a lot of migrants in the dark and basically saying, "Sorry, boys, not today. You're not crossing the border."
Interesting. Okay, well, let's have a look at another one of your videos. Now, this was when you found hundreds of migrants descending on the area using public transport.
The evening before, all around Gravelines, Grand Fort Philippe, and hunkered down in the dunes, I saw hundreds of migrants descend on the area via public transport to get ready for a potential crossing the following morning. When speaking to the locals, they tell me this is always the case when the weather is good.
So it's still happening, Callum. And I guess the problem is it's so out of control that the police cannot really stop all of them.
Exactly that. There is, I mean, that night I saw hundreds, and that's just at the moment when I was there, heading towards the dunes to hunker down. Because basically, one of the things they do when they buy basically a ticket on the boat, one of the traffickers will take them into the dunes the night before. So basically, they've got a line of communication with the traffickers that bring the boats. Often they bring the boats from Belgium. I mean, you might think, oh, that's really far away, but actually, the Belgian border is about, in a good run, 45 minutes away. But they'll often bring it down early in the morning to then get them on at first light. And yeah, there was absolutely loads. There's almost too many. Like I said, I've got to give the French police some credit because it looked like they were actually doing what we're finally paying them to do. But I still actually think it's almost, I don't want to say under-resourced, but maybe they're just undermanned. Hence why, when I made the phone call to the police saying, and I had to do it in French as well because they couldn't speak English. I was quite impressed with that part. But I had to, but they came within 3 minutes when I said that
So
they're a
if they're
migrant
tipped
heading to the beach.
off, they will turn up, which is good to know. But the thing is, we're spending so much money, and on the whole, it doesn't seem to be working. And I think one of the reasons for this, and this is what you discovered in this next little clip that we will look at, is that actually there are lots of ways that the illegals evade the police by simply waiting in the dunes.
So literally as I expected, they are now, so it was a trafficker's car, and they are, I don't know if you can see behind me, can I zoom that in? That is a migrant boat. Now, they were waiting for that plane to disappear. Now, what they're doing is, well, the plane is doing a loop, it's actually, the plane is coming back around, the plane is now up there. And they're actually coming towards me. This could go wrong. But how interesting. So that is a migrant crossing right there.
So they, I guess, have so many tactics, and presumably they are educated by the people smuggling gangs in terms of how they can evade law enforcement. Is that what's going on there?
They're educated by the NGOs. The
Really?
NGOs out there are the ones that when I was
So that's like Care for Calais and organisations like
Care
that.
for Calais, La Vie Active, Utopia 56, one of the biggest ones. Funny enough, actually, seconds after I said that this could go wrong, like seconds after, the Albanians were getting aggressive and shouting at me, "No pictures, no pictures." And I thought, "Oh, look, might
And
have run out here."
how did you know? Sorry, just before you go on, because I think it's a really interesting point. How did you know that it was specifically the Albanians?
Because they are the biggest smuggling gangs out there. There have been the past reports of some smaller Pakistani groups, but basically it's a bit like the drug scene in the UK. It's a market they have monopolized. But mentioning about the whole how they learn how to evade the police. I mean, I think that the traffickers do try and find them a good place to hide. But I remember when I was out there with Rebel News last year, they literally like have printouts on their vehicle windows about their legal rights and the things they can do to help themselves to whatever they want, really.
No, it's so concerning. And the thing is, this is where I feel like Slippery Starmer, the new British Prime Minister, is completely naive. Because Callum, he talks about smashing the gangs, but I don't think he actually has any idea how the gangs work. This isn't like some sort of monolithic enterprise. They are breakaway gangs, and they reinvent, don't they, time and again, in order to avoid the authorities.
Well, actually, I'd probably counter that and say I think that they are very well aware. I mean, anyone with the social media app Snapchat can literally just go on the world map and look along the northern French coastline and see where there's a lot of activity. And quite often, especially this time of year, the traffickers are filming the migrants going down the boat. And I think something like CMIMI is like cost in Albanian. And then it says how much they openly on public social media domains show how much it costs if you want to do it. And I mean, I don't even have Snapchat, but if I can see that, to me, that says our governments in not just the UK, but around Europe can see that as well, which then makes me wonder, are they complicit? Are they getting kickbacks when it comes to all this? We see the costs of the hotels, even food contracts for, supplying the migrants in hotels. You have to wonder, how deep does this go, and who's getting a chunk of a pretty big pie?
And who do you think could be?
Well, I mean, I did a report, so I live near a lot of the Afghan with Operation Lazarite, where lots of Afghans have been put in homes here, and there's a man called David Woods from Helping Homeless Veterans UK. For the past 10 years, he's been writing to the Veterans Minister asking if he can put ex-service personnel who do not require full-time support into unused army accommodation. And he keeps being told no because it's owned by a private consortium called Annington Homes. And if I remember rightly, I might be wrong, I think Liam Fox has shares in that. But now, suddenly, with 5,000 Afghans, oh yeah, you can go in there, that's fine. Which makes me think, suddenly, if you say that they can't have it because it's owned by a private consortium, they've probably been paid quite a lot. And then you have to wonder who is getting a kickback. I don't know, literally off the top of my head, I couldn't say exactly who. But I imagine the higher it goes, you know, the more it drip feeds.
Indeed. And did you pick up at all whether the gangs and the illegals themselves have been emboldened by the fact that the Labour government in the UK has removed the only deterrence that the Conservative government had actually introduced, specifically the Rwanda scheme and the Bibi Stockholm barge?
No, and it wasn't really. I mean, I would have liked to have asked some of that, but the problem is in so they actually the migrants themselves actually segregate themselves. So basically, no one wants to be with the Africans because there is so much crime around those camps. Even previously, in times gone by, charities have covered up rapes of their volunteers. So it's especially when I was around that African camp in Mark. The last thing I'm going to do is get out of my car, especially if I am a known face, having been there before and, well, antagonized people. But are they, have they been deterred? I'd say no, because thousands are still coming. Thousands, how many times have the French actually stopped them? Could the number be a lot higher? The day before I was in the town of Grand Fort Philippe, so where a lot of them come from. So that video that you saw earlier that I took, where I'm watching the migrant boat, that's in a small town called Grand Fort Philippe. Over the canal, it's Gravelines. And the night before we were there, now there's a thing in the Telegraph, actually, in the full like 10-minute news report I had, that there's a link to it there. It was described as like a war. And then when I was walking around the following morning, there's lots of unused tear gas canisters, sorry, used up tear gas canisters.
And how do the locals cope with what were previously, I imagine, lovely French seaside towns being completely overrun?
Je n'aime pas les migrants was something I heard quite a lot
Or what's that?
this
What's
week.
that? I don't speak French.
I don't like the migrants.
Okay.
So that was said not only by the people there, but the police. So the
Really?
police, yeah. So because I made the phone call. So in the full video, there's that bit where I'm filming that car in my wing mirror.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, you couldn't quite get the reg. But what I did do is I made a note of the time, and then I drove down that road because I initially moved my car, thinking I was trying to think like I was a trafficker and thought, right, I don't want to get caught, so what do I do? I won't go back the way I came in. So I moved my car, and annoyingly, he went back the way he came in. So by the time I went round there, the car had gone. But what I did do was make a note of the houses that have got ring doorbells, hoping that, the sensor would have picked them up and they'd have filmed them. And I went and spoke to the police after they'd slashed the boat. I was like, look, I made the phone call. I'd like to help you, find the trafficker. I've got this. It's not much help, but you can see what the make of the car is. And I took down a time and I saw houses with ring doorbells, and maybe that can help. So and I was in they said they were actually really keen to find this guy, which again filled me with a bit of hope because I thought in times gone by they might have just gone, nah, sod it, sod off Englishman, we don't care. But they were like, please help us with this thing. And I got in the car, I was just having a bit of a chat to them, and yeah, they even the French police are sick of having that. And I think they've gone from, years gone by where they thought, right, we'll just let them move through because they don't want to be here. So let's not have them as our problem. I think what they've realized is the more we let through, the more that encourages to come. And ultimately, actually, not only is it affecting the rest of Europe, but it's massively affecting France. So I think they want to stop the boats as well because it stops them wanting to go to France.
Please God, let that be true. I don't know if I share your faith. Let's show a little more now about what you discovered in the dunes.
Were on hand with a full van of supplies for the migrants and were helping others go back to their camps after the failed launch. So in the early hours of this morning, coming down from the paths behind me, I saw hundreds of migrants being escorted by the French National Police. So there seems to be a genuine concentrated effort by the French authorities to actually prevent migrant crossings, unlike in times gone by where we've seen footage of the gendarmerie actually escorting them down to the shoreline to make it Britain's problem. However, the police from this morning are now gone. There is no other police here. Yet, still in there, and the time is only 7:20 here in France, there's still lots of migrants waiting in the bushes, which makes me think, are they starting to try these things even a little bit later in the day when they feel the police will leave? Because after all, this is an ever-adapting operation by both sets of those involved, whether that is the police, the local authorities, or the traffickers and migrants.
And let's have a little further look at specifically what was happening in the dunes.
Amongst all the discarded rubbish and some backpacks was used tear gas canisters, which corroborates the mainstream media's story about violent scenes the night before in what was described as a war, now that the French police are no longer assisting safe passage, but are in fact attempting to prevent crossings. Whilst walking around, I started to hear foreign languages and lots of voices, suggesting some hadn't been found earlier in the morning and were still planning on crossing. So I decided to wait and see if a trafficker would come. Just as I expected, 3 migrants went to the road and made a phone call. Shortly after, in a silver car, a trafficker arrived and went into the park to unload the boat. At this point, I went close to the water and waited for the migrants to come.
But guys and girls, it's the best time of year because football is back. We're talking Premier League in the UK, in the US, it's NFL Sundays and college football Saturdays. And with that comes the glorious grind of fantasy football lineups. You know all about this. Your inner manager comes alive. You're setting the perfect fantasy roster, screaming at your TV, making last-minute waiver moves that either make you a hero or the guy everyone ridicules in the group chat. That's usually me. But listen, while you're over here making sure your fantasy team is dialed in, don't let your personal grooming become the guy that gets left on the bench. Because let's be honest, nobody wants to fumble their grooming routine. And that's where Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra comes in, acting as your all-in-one grooming playbook. From keeping things sharp down below with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra to taking care of those rogue nose and ear hairs, and we all hate those with the Weed Whacker 2.0, this is the lineup that'll keep you looking and feeling like a champ on and off the field. You want to be clean, you want to be confident, you want to be ready to dominate your fantasy league. Now, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Groin and Body Hair Trimmer is the franchise player of your grooming roster with precise trimming capabilities. It's reliable, efficient, and gets the job done without fumbling. Whether it's for date night, a weekend tailgate, or just everyday grooming, this is the tool you want on your squad. No one wants a surprise nose or ear hair making a guest appearance on game day, so the Weed Whacker 2.0 handles those details like a pro, keeping you neat and ready to go. No missed tackles in your grooming game. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra doesn't stop at grooming essentials. It also comes with 2 free gifts. The Boxers 2.0 Midnight Bravo and the Shed 2.0 Toiletry Bag. Premium gear to ensure you're always ready for action, whether at home or on the road. So join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by heading right now to www.manscaped.com. Use the code Outspoken for 20% off and free shipping. Trust me, you'll be drafting the real MVP of grooming this season. Genuinely, it's such a gentle product. product, no more cuts, reduce the risk of ingrown hairs and grooming accidents. And once you try these, you'll never look back. Your grooming game will be changed forever. So 20% off, free shipping using the code Outspoken at manscaped.com. Stay on top of your grooming game and be ready for anything the season throws your way. Wow. So, I mean, Callum, this is so sophisticated. That is why I just have no faith that Starmer has sort of any idea how to smash it. Because what you're proving there is how much of a slick operation this is.
And that's literally, like you said, it's a slick operation. But not only is it a slick operation, it's a huge industry. There was someone talking about the numbers that came the day before, saying it was £1 million day. One day. And £1 million. Like, that's a lot of money for one day.
Totally. And it's decentralized, you see. That's the thing. So it's not like Starmer can think, oh, well, I've got one kingpin and the whole thing is going to shut down. It is specifically designed to be decentralized so that the gangs cannot be smashed.
Yeah. And so, well, somebody said on Twitter, well, we need to track down traffickers. I was like, that is like saying we need to track down every drug dealer in London.
Yeah.
You'll get a handful. Yeah, easily. Exactly. You'll get a handful easily. But
exactly. And even if it happens every now and then, it's not actually going to fundamentally smash what needs to be smashed. The only thing that does is a deterrent, because then presumably a lot of the Albanians, maybe even some of the Africans, would say, well, it's not worth the risk. Because remember, the key point that we haven't made yet, Callum, is for all of the bleeding heart liberals, these folk are already in a safe country. They are in France. They want to get to the UK so that they can work in the black market, sometimes be involved in crime, really bad crime, by the way, whether it be drug rings or sex rings or, in the worst cases, terrorism. And if there is a chance, and this was the Conservative plan, that actually they would end up in Rwanda, the view is they would have decided to stay in France, another safe country.
Exactly. And that's, you mentioned the Conservatives and their plan. What did they even conserve? 14
well,
years.
Yeah.
I was a lifetime Tory. But they couldn't conserve anything.
Totally. And by the way, I'm not defending what the Conservatives have done with stopping votes. I'm really not, because I think there's so much more they could and should have done. However, I did support the Rwanda scheme. I did support Bibi Stockholm, because at least it was some sort of deterrent, and a deterrent is what's required.
Well, I mean, I supported the Rwanda scheme mainly because I thought, we're spending this much money on them having it here anyway. Might as well spend it on sending them over. But I never supported the Bibi Stockholm, because there was some days where more people turned up in one day that would fill the Bibi Stockholm. And that was one of the arguments I used to try put out then. But yeah, back to your point.
Yeah.
The only way to stop this is to physically stop them getting in the water. Or rather, our RNLI to stop acting as a taxi service.
Yes.
And I
exactly,
don't know.
we should be turning the boats back.
Here's a novel idea. How about our Navy defends our shoreline?
Yes.
Our Navy has done on the shores of Iran this year than it's done on the shores of the UK in the past 50 years. So we have to ultimately stop them in France.
And turn the boats back, which can be done using existing international law. Australia did it. That sort of deterrent stopped the boats overnight. And the thing is, I do understand what you're saying about the Bibi Stockholm. I get that it wasn't practical, just like I understand the Rwanda scheme wasn't practical. But it's not the fact that every single migrant that arrived illegally in the country was going to end up on the Bibi Stockholm or was going to end up in a flight to Rwanda. The idea is that they don't want to take the risk of shelling out thousands and thousands of pounds to the people smugglers and then ending up on the Bibi Stockholm or ending up in Rwanda. And that's where a deterrent effect works. It's really interesting to look at who is actually making the cross scene illegally in these small boats. Now, you've broken it down brilliantly here, Callum, so let's watch this and we'll react off the back.
So who is crossing the channel in small boats? According to the ONS, in the year ending June 2024, Afghans were the top nationality crossing the channel, making up just under a fifth of all small boat arrivals. Iranians with 13% were in second place, followed by the arrivals from Vietnam and Turkey, both on 10%, which could explain the massive increase in high street Turkish barbers, which often sit empty. About 83% of small boat arrivals in the 12 months to June 2024 were male, and where age was recorded, more than 40% were between the ages of 25 and 39 years old. The question many are asking is, why are Afghans crossing illegally to claim asylum when there is a very clear legal pathway for Afghans through Operation Lazarite to come to the safe shores of Great Britain?
And Callum, what is the answer to that? Why are they?
Back to the fundamental one. Stop them in France. They often come. So in France, they get basically nothing from the state. Their entire stay is facilitated by the NGO organizations. One of the things they do is quite often the Albanians would send over Albanians. So we had that large influx of Albanian migrants in small boats. Quite often they basically come to the UK to basically act as the marketing team. So quite often they would then show recordings of the stuff they get in the UK. And then as soon as that's on the internet, the world and his wife can see exactly what you can get in the UK. So it's often seen as the gold mine for, the land where the streets are paved with gold for anyone who wants to come here. And they see just how easy it is to get what they want in the United Kingdom. And this is only really a thing because we are signed up to I might get my year wrong here, but I think it's the 1951 and 1957 UN Asylum Convention, where basically, because we're part of that, if somebody comes here with zero documentation, it's up to us, or rather the government, to prove someone isn't an asylum seeker than for them to prove they are. Now, with no documentation, you don't have a clue if they are. You can't disprove it. So it then becomes hearsay. So you have to take them on their word. We could leave that tomorrow. We could even break that international agreement if we wanted. The government chooses not to. Whether
Of
that
course
is
they do. Just like they choose not to leave the ECHR, which is another thing that needs to happen. No, it's really, really fascinating. Now, Callum, how do you do this work independently? Because as you say, you were previously working for Rebel News. You've now gone completely independent. So how do you do this work? Why do you do this work? And what can people do to support you so you can do more of it?
Well, thank you very much for that offer. So ultimately, I pay for this myself. Some projects make a loss, some projects make a small profit, but it's solely independently funded. I've set up my own businesses so I can actually take time out to do this because I don't want to be, I used to be a professional actor. I worked as an actor. I don't want to be a journalist. It's an interesting job, but I do this because I love my country and my community, and I want to see the country get better. And if I know the mainstream media are lying to me, I've got to go look at it myself. So if anyone is, so gracious to, and only do it if you can. I don't want poor people. It's not saying I don't want poor people involved, but I don't want people who can't afford to help fund my stuff at the website, which you can do. But I appreciate anyone who can help because ultimately I do this I do this for the love of my community. But I've actually had a plan. Have we got time for me to talk about my plan?
Please go ahead.
So I need to. If anyone here watching this is a legal expert, or especially if they know French law, please do get in touch. You can. I think my DMs are open on Twitter. I think, or you can always email via the website. I want to have a rotation of people in France, and this is, if MI6 or the government are watching this, this is purely legal. To basically be in France and be dotted around the coastline to literally see it. And as soon as they see a boat heading to the shore, phone the police because the government's failed us. The only people who can actually stop this are ourselves. So, I'm hoping that I can find some benefactor, not to pay me a penny, but to literally just cover the costs of like ferries, accommodation, food. So people who love their country, who have the time to give, can literally go out there. And even if we need to see what the laws are regarding drones, but literally if we can stop the boats with the help of the French police for, I don't know, a month, the industry will fall on itself.
Very
Just
good
need
point.
to dry up the resources for them, which are people.
Very good point. Well, look, we'll put all of the details in the show notes, but what is the best place that people can get to you via your website? Do you just want to give the address?
Yeah, so it's callumsmilesmedia.com. CALLUM, smiles as in media.com.
Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.